Let's talk about how the creator economy is changing the startup industry. The most recent example, Alex Earl, a TikTok influencer, helping Poppies, a startup, get acquired for almost $2 billion. I am Anna, the CEO of Founders Registry, and I've helped so many startups here in Los Angeles and all over the country facilitate deals not only with influencers, but also with celebrities here in Hollywood. I will break down for you how influencers are changing the startup game, how startups are helping influencers create wealth, and how Hollywood celebrities play into all of this. First, why are so many startups starting to work together with influencers? Well, there is an easy answer. They're using the platform of influencers as a growth engine. And the best part about it is that both parties win. The content creator, in exchange, usually gets a piece of equity into a startup. The startup, on the other hand, saves millions of dollars that they don't have to spend on marketing by giving equity to an influencer who is then lending them their platform to promote the company. This is especially great for CPG brands, which again, we saw in the example of Alex Earl having Poppies all over her TikTok feed. And before you knew it, all of the other influencers followed that trend, including Poppies in their everyday get ready with me videos. And so this drink of a startup company became a viral sensation. Now, how are these deals usually structured? I personally prefer for my founders when we use an advisory agreement. Here's why. In most cases, startups already have an advisory agreement, which is basically just a legal document that gives someone equity in your company in exchange for labor, knowledge, whatever it is that your advisor is giving you in exchange for the equity that you give them. That way, you don't have to spend more money on legal fees because you already have that advisory agreement and you just switch out the deliverables. Now, here's something really important to note. When we work with influencers in exchange for equity, we always make sure that the deliverables are actionable. So let's, for example, start with what's a regular advisory agreement. I'm also going to link to another video where I'm breaking down the difference between mentor, advisor, and consultant, so you can check that out for more information. For the sake of this example, I'm going to keep it very short. An advisory agreement, very standard, would be 0.25% in exchange for an advisor to work with you over the course of 2 years, having a once-a-month call with you as the CEO of the company. And their equity vests over the course of 2 years, which means it takes 2 years for them to get the full 0.25%. Let's say after a year they stop working with you, that would mean that only half of their equity would have vested. Now, when we work with influencers, we draft those advisory agreements very differently, because what you need them to do is not just to stay engaged with you for 2 years, but it's not going to help you if they get advisory shares and they never speak about your brand and they favor brand deals that are paid for them. So obviously, in order for this advisory agreement to be mutually beneficial, it is important that we include in the advisory agreement how often they will be talking about the brand. I'm going to give you some examples here. For example, the advisory agreement would look as the following. We're going to take right now a CPG brand. For the sake of this example, we're going to use Topicals. Topicals reaches out to an influencer and says, hey, we would like for you to become an advisor in exchange for equity. The advisory agreement we would structure would look something like, the expectation is to include Topicals in a Get Ready With Me video at least once a week. Not only are they going to mention it, but they're also going to have a product placement in their content and they're going to tag the brand in their caption. In addition to that, the brand agrees to host an influencer party for Topicals where that influencer gets to invite people in their network. And Topicals is the one paying for the Airbnb, the music, the food, the entertainment, and everything. When an influencer has their weekend together with their friends and their friends show up at the Airbnb, everyone is going to have goodie bags waiting for them from Topicals. The agreement would say something like every single person that is invited, it is for up to 10 people, has to post at least 5 videos of that weekend sponsored by Topicals, tag the brand, and have the product placement visible in their content. In addition to that, we want once a month when that influencer creates a video talking about their favorite products that they always use, their must-haves, we want them to also have a product placement of Topicals, mention them in the caption, and talk about the benefits of the product. Now, those deals obviously vary, right? Because you might be a very early stage startup that is not actually able to pay for an entire influencer weekend. And you might try to get an influencer deal in order to get the visibility needed to get to that milestone. Now, the nice thing about advisory agreement is that you can draft them as creatively as you want, fitting your needs and the needs of the influencer. So maybe you're not able to get someone like Alex Earl that has millions of followers, but you might be able to get an influencer that might only have 500,000 followers. And you might ask more of them as deliverables in exchange for equity. Or you might be able to get an influencer that has more followers, but that might not agree to posting as many times about you as I've just mentioned in my example, and that might say, hey, listen, I'm willing to do that deal with you. However, at most, I can do a product placement twice a month because that way I stay true to my brand and I'm not comfortable promoting your company 30 times a month on my social media channels. So I'm going to give you fewer content in exchange for less equity. Again, you can be as flexible as you have to be in order to sign the people that you really want to sign on. The most important thing is to figure out who is actually aligned with your brand. You need to find an influencer who shares your values. Just like the influencer has to make sure that whatever brand deal they're entering is not going to hurt their brand and their reputation. I'm going to give you an example. If you're a CPG brand that talks a lot about eco-friendly packaging, you want to make sure that you work with an influencer who might also talk about sustainability on their social media channels. Vice versa, the influencer is going to want to make sure that you're not greenwashing your company. And so it's important that both parties do some due diligence on each other to make sure that it's a good match. Now back to the advisory agreements. As I mentioned before, a traditional advisory agreement vests over the period of 2 years. With influencers, a typical advisory agreement vests over the period of social media posts. So basically their equity vests over the period of different milestones. And by the time they have posted all of the content that you both agree to, their entire equity has already vested. Now, why does that help influencers? We see it time and time again that influencers that have a successful online brand, that have high engagement, that have millions of followers, are still talking about how it is hard for them to sustain their lifestyle because they constantly have to chase the next brand deal. That is the case even for people with a large platform. Now, everyone is fully aware that a startup is not going to be able to pay $50,000 for a social media post. It is not sustainable and it's not in the budget. But for the sake of this example, think of an influencer that has 1 million followers, that has a large and highly engaged audience. They might not be able to sustain their lifestyle or go full-time into influencing because they still have to chase all of these brand deals in order to sustain their lifestyle. However, imagine that same influencer now collecting equity into, let's say, 5 different companies. If it's a lifestyle influencer, for example, they might go into an influencer deal with a beverage company. They might go into another influencer deal with a fashion company. They might go into another one with a skincare company. They might go into another one with a makeup company. And let's throw a 5th one in. They might go in there for a jewelry brand. So while that might sound like a lot, and they have to now create content for 5 brands that are not going to pay them because those are all startups that gave them equity in exchange for the content. Let's go back to the example of Poppies and Alix Earle. Thanks to the involvement of Alix Earle, they were able to become a viral sensation and sell their company for $2 billion. Now I'll let you do the math, but if influencers keep signing onto those deals, collecting equity in all of these different startups, it's only a matter of time until one or multiple of them are going to be very successful. You could even build into the agreement that once they hit a certain threshold of profitability, you also get a share of their profits, in addition to the equity that you already get. And this is one of the smartest and easiest and free ways for influencers to start building generational wealth. You're collecting equity into companies that one day will be worth billions of dollars. And the nice thing about that as an influencer with a platform is that they themselves can become part of the success because they themselves can decide whether or not to post about the brand. They can go above and beyond, like Alix did in the example of Poppies. If the founder manages to get that influencer to truly buy into the mission of the company, that influencer is truly passionate about that success of that startup and takes their role as an advisor so seriously that they mention it at every single influencer event, that they tell all of their influencer friends about it, that their influencer friends also start posting about the brand, has ripple effects, which is why it is one of my favorite models to design for our companies and also for the influencers that we work with, because it is a win-win situation. It also allows a lot of the influencers that we connect with our startups to dabble into entrepreneurship for the first time, to maybe one day start their own lifestyle brand. And it will help them in the future to raise capital. They can mention to investors that they're actually advisors in 10 different startups and have been heavily involved with those startups, because that is experience that money can't buy you. And influencers are with that also able to build the relationships with investors and with people on the cap table of those set startups. And so slowly over time, they themselves can go into the entrepreneurial ecosystem. And on the other hand, we're seeing more and more entrepreneurs themselves starting to become content creators and realizing that by sharing their vision with the public, they're already starting a pipeline of potential future customers. So we've seen that shift happen, especially in the last 5 years, where more and more founders are becoming content creators and where more and more content creators are starting to become entrepreneurs. And the intersection of combining both of them so that everyone in our ecosystem wins is so powerful and is highlighted by the examples that I just mentioned. If you're interested in learning more about that, go to foundersregistry.com and reach out to me and my team as we help facilitate those deals every day. And don't forget to sign up to our newsletter because we're about to start hosting a dinner series where we're going to bring together influencers and founders to make those deals happen. And in my next video, I'm going to be talking about how we facilitate those deals between celebrities in Hollywood and startup founders, and how you too can get involved with talent agencies that can help you get advisors that can change the outcome of your company forever. So stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe and leave any questions in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you learned something new today.